In this video, I'll show you how to set up a workflow to automatically remind someone to post their response to your async conversation. So I've got 3 goals for this workflow. I'm going to create a conversation and then send it to a specific client. And if that client doesn't post a response within 3 days, then I want to send them an email to nudge them to post their response. And I want to make sure that we don't send that email to the client if they do post their response within 3 days. Okay, let me show you how to set it up with a workflow. Okay, so I've started a new conversation and I titled it Feedback Needed. And then I recorded my message to my client. Now, before I share this conversation with my client, we're going to open these settings for this message and click Create Workflow. Now, since we want to start this workflow when the client has viewed my message, meaning when they've pressed play on my video, we're going to set the trigger to this message is viewed. Now, I recommend leaving this who can trigger this workflow setting to any guest. Now, you could specify a specific contact with a specific email or a couple of other options. But since I'm only going to be sharing this with a single person and I know that they're going to be a guest, I'm just going to leave it flexible and select any guest. Now, before we go ahead and create the workflow, we want to set one more setting. Now, frequency we can leave to its default, which is only once. We don't want to trigger this workflow every time someone views the message. We only want to trigger it once. And then this last setting is very important. We want to set an ending event for this workflow so that if our client does post their response, let's say within a day, then we don't want to run this workflow and we don't want to send that email reminder to them. So we'll end this workflow when a message is posted. I could specify that that message must be a reply within this messages thread, but I'll leave that unchecked because I don't know whether my client might post it as a thread or to the main conversation. So I'll leave that unchecked. And who can end this workflow should remain set to any guest, meaning a new message posted by any guest would end this workflow. And in this case, I know that the only guest who's going to see this conversation is my client. Okay, now I can go ahead and click Create Workflow. All right, so we've created the trigger for the workflow and we've set up how the workflow could be ended early. Now we need to add a step or the action that will occur when this workflow runs. Let's click Add Step, and the step type is going to be Send an Email Notification. All right, we need to select who the email should be sent to. Let's set that to the person who triggered this. Now that setting alone should identify our client when I send them the conversation and then they view the message. That will identify them and that should send the email to them. But just to be sure, we can specify additional emails and I'll just put in my client's email address here. Now, if that email turns out to be the same email that is triggered here, the system will not send a duplicate email. So this is just to be sure. I'm going to make sure my from name is correct. Now, the default subject and message says reminder to send you a reply, and it's a friendly reminder, so I can customize it. And by the way, up here in the subject line, if we want to pull in the title of the conversation, we can use this special tag with brackets for conversation title. Now, we're not quite done yet. We need to set the delay on this step. If we don't do this, then this reminder email will be sent immediately after they click play on our message. So we want to set a delay there, setting a period of time has gone by. We want to set that to 3 days. So that means that after the trigger occurs, meaning after my client plays my message, then we'll wait 3 days. And if they have not posted a message yet, then this step will send an email to the client. Okay, we'll go ahead and click Create Step. Now, very important, this workflow will not run unless we activate it. So we have to click the Activate Workflow button. And when it's active, we'll see the active state up here. Okay, we've got our workflow all set on our message. The only thing left to do now is to share this conversation with our client. I can go to Share, and I can go to Email, and I can share this with my client via email. Now, when I view this message as my client and I click play, playing that message has triggered the workflow. And I can see that by looking at the workflow's runs right here. We see that one is now running and scheduled. And if my client does not post their reply within 3 days, then they're going to receive our email reminder nudging them to post their reply. And fast forward a few days, just to show you, here is that reminder email that our client will see containing our message to nudge them to post their response. They can simply click this button to go straight back into the conversation and post that response. So that's how you set up an automatic reminder email using workflows.